starting shortly, so if you're still at the bar, grab your drink and then come on through and find a seat. And there's still plenty of room at the front, don't be shy. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight on this special evening. I'm so pleased to be here with you tonight for this discussion of Angela O'Keeffe's book, Night Blue. I'd like to firstly begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're currently on, the Yagara and Turrbal people, as well as the traditional owners of the lands from which you're all joining us from via Zoom. I pay my respects to elders past and present. Sovereignty was never ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Firstly, just some housekeeping for the night. If you do need the bathroom, they are inside, up the stairs and just down the hallway. If you do get lost, someone will be inside to show you around. The bar will be open throughout and after the event. And then at about 7:15, we'll move to a Q&A. So please save your questions until then. And if you are joining us on Zoom, you'll be able to send through your questions into the chat box. Our Zoom host will be sending through a link of where you can purchase the book, and that will also show you how the chat function will work. If you do post on social media tonight, be sure to tag us, Angela and Phil Brown. And then to purchase copies of Night Blue, we'll have them inside after the event, and then we'll also have Angela out the front at a desk to sign your copy, and you can go ask questions there as well if you miss out during the Q&A. So in conversation with Angela tonight, we have Phil Brown. Phil Brown is the arts editor of the Courier Mail. In a career spanning 3 decades, he's written for an impressive string of national and international newspapers, magazines, and journals. He's the author of 2 books of poetry, 2 humorous memoirs, Travels with My Angst and Any Guru Will Do, both published by UQP. His most recent book is The Kowloon Kid, A Hong Kong Childhood, which was published by Transit Lounge in 2019. Please join me in welcoming Angela and Phil.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Yes, cool, thank you. Welcome, Angela. Nice to meet you. I've interviewed Angela, so I'm pleased to meet her this evening. We're going to start the proceedings with Angela setting the scene by reading an excerpt from the book, and it's about the arrival of loopholes in Australia. So that's how we're going to start. So, please.
After years in the easy ambivalence of a household, I was now an exhibit that everyone had an opinion about. Even some who claimed to admire me were affronted by the circumstances of my purchase. The extravagant amount spent on a single foreign painting could have been used to purchase the works of many Australian artists, they said. To quote one of the guides working at the gallery years later, no other painting in Australian history has drawn so much interest or criticism. Yet I began to suspect that Australians, at least those who came to see me, weren't as outraged as the papers claimed them to be. Condemning, yes, but there was a laconic tone to their condemnation. I remember one woman staring at me for a long time before leaning towards her companion. I assumed by the gentle set of her face that she might say something in my favour, but she murmured, "I'd have rathered a new hospital." Paul Hogan, the comedian who years later, so I learned from another tour guide, reached worldwide fame for his Crocodile Dundee character, was filmed screwing up his face and holding his nose as he looked at me. Yet between takes, his smile was easy, and I sensed he had no real rancour towards me. The Australians spoke with a flattened accent. Their sentences were short, as if words tired them. They laughed quietly, almost apologetically. In some, I detected a grudging admiration. Whitlam might be an idiot when it comes to money, I heard one say, but at least now America knows where we are on the map.
Well said. Was Paul Hogan a painter? He worked on the bridge. I don't know if he painted.
Thank you.
My introduction to ballet was Paul Hogan. Does everybody remember his version of the Nutcracker Suite? It's a beautiful book. It's one of those books. Now, I'm the arts editor of the Courier Mail, so and I've been books editor, and I get a lot of books across the desk, and most of them make these that have grown, or just I've set them aside. I got this book, and as soon as I read about it, I was intrigued because I love loopholes. I was telling Angela, I was in Canberra just before COVID, covering a Picasso exhibition at the National Gallery of Australia. But I didn't go to see the Picassos first. I went straight to loopholes and stood in front of it. And can I just, you will see this later, you probably know about it anyway, but of course the painting is replicated here, which is very clever. And it's a nice slim volume. I like a slim volume. I don't know, how did you come up with the idea? And what I love is the fact that the painting kind of talks. I don't know, did you watch Mr. Ed when you were young?
Yes. Well, I did, but that had no influence on this.
But it could be, I mean, it's an idea that in the wrong hands, having a talking painting or a painting telling its own story could be, difficult. But you've managed it. What made you decide to do it that way?
That was when the story came to life, when I decided that I could actually have a go at that. And I think because I'd also been reading about Pollock, and he said famously the painting has a life of its own, and I really loved that. And then I read a book by Heather Rose.
Oh yes, of course, yeah.
Museum of Modern Love,
Yes.
and she has the muse, the artist's muse, telling the story.
Is that about Abramovich?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So that influenced me, and I just woke up one morning and thought, what if the painting speaks? I'll have a go at that. So yeah.
You've written other books, but not published?
Yeah, no, they're sort of not alive the way this one is.
Some of you may know some of Angela's stories already. Can I just check here who's not related to Angela? Oh, that's okay. That's okay. In your family, are you known as a writer? Does everybody know about your
I
endeavours?
think everyone's known that I've been doing this for a long time,
Yeah.
and that it's a passion of
Yeah.
mine. And I had a couple of short stories published, and people have read those.
Have you been frustrated with your writing, or are you just doing it because you enjoy it? You're not concerned?
Oh
Because
no, I've always had ambition.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
always been there. So this is no accident,
No.
because I always wanted to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So I've just had a long apprenticeship, I suppose, and learned a lot along the way.
It must be very, very satisfying now that it's published.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I thought I'd sort of not enjoy this part of it, but I have been. So it's a nice
Oh, this is the
surprise.
best part. You've done it, I'm always interested in the process because I've been through it myself, and I started out as a poet, and if anybody writes poetry, the rejection is just brutal. How did you feel when you knew it was going to be published? And you knew it was going to...
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, champagne.
What did the publisher say to you about why he liked the book?
Well, Barry,
Yes,
so
I do.
he doesn't sort of say much. So, no, he was enthusiastic. He said, I love that book. That's
Yeah.
what he said.
Well, that'll do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
So-
interesting. I feel good because I leapt on it first, but in the interim, if anybody read in the Australian, was it last weekend?
Yes.
Caroline Overington, the very new literary editor, was absolutely raving about it, and that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And there's a review coming as well in the Australian.
Yes.
So so you're sort of well and truly on your way. Have you heard anything from the art world?
Yeah, I have. So the commendation on the back of the book is by Michael Fitzgerald.
Another transit lounge?
He is a transit lounge author and he writes fiction. but he's also editor of Art Monthly Australasia, and so he's written the commendation, and next month the first chapter is going into that.
He has a book out about art at the moment as well.
Yes, he does.
Yes.
It's coming out.
Yeah. And his previous one about Stevenson and art.
That's correct.
Similarly fascinating.
Yeah.
So Transit Lounge likes this. I'm just wondering, what about the National Gallery of Australia? Have you heard of
They have the book, and I've been down there. I actually went down there for an interview with the Guardian, and it was photographed with the painting.
Oh, cool. When was
so
this?
that was a few weeks ago now.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long since you had seen the painting?
2 weeks.
No, I mean prior to this photo with the Guardian.
Yeah, no, 2 weeks.
Oh, 2 weeks
because
previously.
I went to see another exhibition. I went there because I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, I could have combined those two.
So you're just going there and hanging around near the painting
Hanging out.
with your book?
No, I went there. I actually didn't have my printed photos.
Why not?
Yeah.
Are you aware of anybody else writing anything fictional about the painting?
No, I don't. No, I mean, no, I haven't heard of it.
Interesting, isn't it? Because it's so famous and so much is being written about it in other ways, but you've managed to come completely out of left field and do something that hasn't been done before. I
think that, I mean, just while I was writing it, I was actually thinking, wow, I hope nobody else kind of gets this idea. Because,
about a talking painting, I don't know.
but it doesn't talk.
No, I know.
Yeah.
It tells a story.
I mean, it's speaking, it's telling the story, but it's not.
It's not a talking painting.
No, it's not a talking painting. It's a feeling painting, I guess. But sorry, I've lost the train of thought. But, no, I just was thinking it's such a good story. You know, not only is it, I mean, there's that controversy, and then Whitlam gets sacked, and it just seems to me like I really wanted to kind of explore that.
I was a little bit interested in your backstory because I interview a lot of authors, and often they're from the city or whatever. But for those who don't know you, I mean, the family knows your story, but you're from a large family, from the country, from...
it's called Inglesby.
Inglesby.
Near Gatton.
Tell us a little bit about your childhood, because I think it's interesting.
Yeah,
so you grew up on a farm?
Yeah, grew up on a farm, a beef cattle farm, and we all went to a very small local primary school, and actually on the 9th. So by the time I came along, things, you know, we actually were driven to school, but my elder brothers and sisters actually rode horses to school, and they were put in the paddock. The horses were.
It sounds like that in days.
So it was, you know, when you think about it, it was quite amazing.
It's quite unique. Have you written about your childhood?
Yeah, I have a little bit, but I think the childhood definitely influences this book, even though it's not literally in there. You know, because I think you were asking me before about how did you know, how come you're writing about art?
Yes.
And you were asking me about my childhood and where's the connection?
It did come up in your household, the subject
of art.
Of
well, I
Blue
think
Poles.
probably Blue Poles. Oh, definitely, yeah.
And the whole Whitlam business.
That was. I mean, the whole country was talking about that painting, which was, I think, now amazing. But
your dad was a farmer. And, And was he? Did he like golf or not?
I think he liked him.
Yeah.
Yeah, overall. I mean, I don't think I think he liked him because I think he was quite sad that golf was sacked. So yeah.
And you remember that being discussed in the household? And
the sacking?
Yeah, the sacking.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So you were aware of Blue Poles and the
I was aware of Blue Poles, but then of course these things just get sort of put to the back. You know, it's not like I thought about that for years, but it just happened to sort of come up.
So you're not like a Blue Poles tragic who's been going down there?
No, not at all. And you know, people keep telling me that about you know, there's all this research being done on painting at the moment, and you know, I mean, it's lovely and I'm interested, but not that interested.
No.
You know, it's not like I have to know every detail.
You don't want to overthink it.
No, not at all.
So when you, so what was the deciding factor to write about the novel? When did you?
I think it was just simply that it came into a novel I was writing, and it was just in a scene, and people, you know, probably drawn from the kitchen table discussions from that time. And so the painting was there, and the rest of that novel kind of died. And I just sort of kept thinking about the painting. And then I came up with the idea, okay, I'm going to let the painting speak, basically. And that's when it took off, and I knew I had something.
Shane Goff's not still around, I'm sure he enjoyed it. Tell me, well, one of the interesting things about it, of course, I mean, money, it's gauche to talk about money in art, but so the galleries and things don't like to talk about money so much. But it was purchased for
$1.3 million Australian dollars.
And now we think it's worth.
I've heard 300, 400 million, something like that.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the monetary value is not everything,
No.
but it is staggering to think. And also that Goff and James Mollison made the right decision.
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's the most popular painting in that gallery, so.
And it's a work of world significance, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Tell me about, so you live in Sydney then, so,
Yes.
so you grew up there. Just tell me a little bit about your trajectory of your chronology of.
So
Growing up
I went to uni at, it's called Darling Downs Institute.
Yes, I went there
then.
too.
You did too, I know.
It was called DDIAE. It sounds like a pesticide. We used to call it the Institute. Which sounded like, anyway.
So
yes,
I
I
went
went
there,
to-
and then I went to Sydney. So I've done numerous jobs.
And did you have Bruce Dorr the poet for?
Yes,
the
I
teacher?
did.
Yes.
Yeah, he
We both
was
shared that.
wonderful,
Yeah.
and he became a poet out of that
Out of that, yes.
time.
Out of-
Yeah.
Yeah, with Bruce, yeah,
Yeah.
as my mentor.
Great.
Well, it was actually quite a good establishment. I mean, it was a little bit of a bohemian kind of enclave in Toowoomba, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We lived in James Street. We had a house. The police came around one night and they went through all our stuff. I smoked a pipe at the time, and they said, "What are you smoking that?" I said, "Amphora."
That's what my father smoked.
Your career in Sydney has been in what area?
So I've been a teacher,
Yeah.
nanny. I've done all sorts of jobs. At the moment, I'm working in my husband's business in sales.
Making the logos. I mean, tell me, and when do you do your writing? How do you work that?
Well, now I have some days
You have some days.
every week. I work part time, so that's good. So I guess I've always made time for it. Yeah.
When do you do? Is it a late night thing? Or
Oh
is it
no, it's morning mainly.
Right.
Yeah, it's daytime, not.
Yeah. The thing about Blue Poles is it was painted by somebody,
Yes.
and Jackson Pollock is a very sort of interesting, tragic figure.
Yeah.
I guess we've all seen the Ed Harris movie. We've all seen the Ed Harris movie. You didn't want to get too caught up.
I
in it.
haven't.
You haven't
I
seen it?
didn't want to.
No. Yeah. It's pretty good. He is very good. So, what do you think of Pollock? How much research did you do about Pollock? Were you very interested in his life? And
Yeah, so I read a biography about Pollock, and I was actually very shocked by, I mean, I heard all the stories about how he was an alcoholic and he was quite violent, but when I read that book, I realised the extent of it was pretty full on, and you start to wonder how his wife was able to actually stay with him.
how do you think think she was
able to. She was extremely loyal, and I guess she loved him. But
And she was
she, I mean, she has her own story, and
established artist herself.
that's correct. And she said something. I read a quote from her recently where she said, "I painted before Pollock, during Pollock, after Pollock," because you know that she sort of gets pushed to the side a bit.
But you sort of give her her due in the book.
Yes, I wanted to give her something.
Yeah.
You know, when I read about his life and her life, I wanted to, I mean, not redress anything, but just to sort of explore that a little bit.
And he wasn't living in some swanky inner city suburb with a flash studio, and was he? He was the actual physical, and you talk about where the painting was created. Tell us about that, because that's a pretty rough and ready kind of.
Yeah, so it's a
birth of the
barn.
painting, yeah.
His studio, they lived in, I actually went there a few years ago and visited the studio in Springs on Long Island, and it was a fishing shed, some sort of fishing shed originally.
So what's this? This is
The barn where
and what's this place called? Where you?
it's called Springs,
Is this the actual?
East Hampton Springs.
Is this the like a tourist attraction now, or was that?
Yeah, it's called the Lee Krasner Study Centre,
Right.
House and Study Centre. I think it's the
So
official name.
You can visit it.
You can visit it.
Yeah.
I went in winter. It was closed, but they let me, they let people who
Is there
are
a cafe?
research in. There's no cafe, and you have to wear these little green slippers into the studio because the floor has the paint, because he painted on the floor, and there's all bits of paint sort of left there, so you can't damage that. So you have to wear these little slippers, and
It was a very
beautiful.
robust painter, wasn't he? The way he,
absolutely,
you know, like,
it was all about the gesture. So
and are they aware of the book over there? The people around the Krasner?
I told her I was writing it, but I haven't actually sent it to
They'll
her.
hear about
So hopefully, I mean, hopefully it will be
Yeah.
published in the States.
One of the sort of aha moments of the book is the creation of the poles
Yeah.
and how that happened.
Mm.
Just tell us a little bit about that, because I mean, I didn't actually know that. So
You mean with the 4x2?
Yeah,
The piece of 4x2. So he kind of had a bit of trouble finishing the painting. He wasn't sure how to kind of exit the painting. That's the story.
Mm.
And so he came up with this idea of putting on 8 poles. And so he just used a piece of timber. And
why do you think he did that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't sort of know about art in that way,
No.
to think of it in that way.
No.
I just know from inside that
Yeah.
I like the idea that there was a problem and he came up with a solution, and then
Yeah.
that solution then becomes...
Which is quite a kind of like, strange solution for a painter. Like, oh, I'll get a bit of 4x2. That'll sort of
But
help.
Lee broke glass and put it on the painting, and I mean, that wasn't that
Yeah, I
unusual.
mean, no, I suppose not for him. He'd probably been drinking that out of that glass before he broke it.
It was a test tube, I think.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah. So it is quite fascinating, his process, and of course it all came to a crashing halt with his very tragic death.
Yes.
Does that? What do you think? How do you think it would have affected the whole story if he'd still been with us? I mean, because there's a little bit more mystique, isn't there? Because he left the stage.
Well, it would ruin my story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to say because some artists sort of fizzle out a little bit, don't they? And their
Yeah.
later work's not as good.
Well, it's like Jimi Hendrix or somebody, or Jim Morrison. They're gone, and then they become these.
At their peak.
Yeah.
Gone. Yeah. Yeah.
And but Lee lived on for a long
That's
time.
correct.
So,
Yeah, she painted in that barn for many years, much longer than he
Is it an
painted there.
attractive place? Is it, or is it?
Oh, it's
forbidding?
gorgeous.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah.
It's
And you'd know a thing or two about barns, would you?
well, we don't call them barns, but
Oh, no.
definitely about
What do we call them?
sheds.
Sheds. Sorry, sheds.
But yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah, well, that was important that you went there.
Yeah, it was great, and I mean, I wasn't even sure how it would affect the book, but I just knew I needed to go and stand in that barn. And Kate Grenville talks about that, the way she writes books. She says, I need to go to the physical space
Yes.
and stand there,
The river or
wherever, and not really know what you're looking for.
Interesting.
Mm.
And so the story, the painting tells the story of its early life. It was in an apartment, right?
Yeah.
In a wealthy person's apartment.
That's correct. He was an art collector.
Yeah. Did you have any contact with those people?
No, I didn't, actually. I mean, when I was
Sometimes if
writing,
you do contact people, it spoils the story.
right. I actually did try to contact one of them, but she didn't answer me, so. Just went
Was
to-
anybody involved in the painting? Like no past owners or any people aware of the book, or you can speak to anybody and
No, well, the past owners, well,
They're all
that particular one's dead
Yeah.
now. No, I haven't spoken to them.
when the painting, when we got the painting, we didn't see it for some years.
Well, we went on tour straight away.
Straight away.
Yep.
But then it got boxed up again.
That's correct.
How long? What was the?
Some
How long
years,
was
I think it was 8 years or something.
It's crazy, isn't
Yeah.
it?
I
How
can't
long was the
remember.
tour? Was it quite extensive?
Yeah, it went to Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide and Melbourne. And
I wonder where it was shown in Brisbane at the Echo.
it was at the town hall
Oh, right.
because so whatever the art gallery was here, what was it called back then? It had
Yes.
been flooded, the 74 flood, it had been flooded, so it
course.
wasn't
Okay.
able to have the exhibition, so they had it at town hall.
Hmm.
And children under 17 were free. I love that, under 17. It
Why
just
did you
seems-
think that?
it just seems so innocent, you know. Now it's under 12.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm.
Oh, you had to pay to go and see it.
You had to pay to go and see it, and
About
people, well, people obviously were willing to because there were queues.
Well, the beauty is now you can just rock in and to the National Gallery of Australia. You got to pay your airfare to Canberra, so.
Mm.
I did hear, and I think I told you this, that I did hear it was going on tour again.
You said that. I would love that to happen.
So I spoke to Nick Mitsovich, the director of the National Gallery. He intimated that it would go on tour again, and that may be for its anniversary there's an anniversary coming up. Isn't
Yeah, it would be next year. It would be 70 years old next year.
there?
And then the following year would be 50 years since Whitlam, or James Morrison, and yes, since we.
And the Whitlam story is in the book, and so
That's
it's a story of, so there is a bit of social history in there.
Yeah, I mean
Not
it's
laboured.
not. Yeah, that's right.
Pardon
It's
the
not.
pun.
But it's in there.
Tell me, what do you think the painting is about? Do you ever think about that? What does it mean?
Well, the book, I guess the book is about that. I would say a kind of the ongoingness of life, really. I mean, that's sort of what the book is about.
Yeah.
Is that life keeps going forward. There's always some sort of possibility there ahead. Yeah, but other than that,
So there's still a certain mystique about it, isn't there? about the painting?
Yeah, well, it's an abstract expressionist painting, so you can sort of put, I mean, you know, there's no story in it, but I've kind of decided, oh, hang on, let's see if there is.
How much have you read about it? Because I imagine you've written about it a lot. Did you read everything?
I read about Pollock, and I read the information that Eugene Award from the National Gallery of Australia sent me. And so there was some great essays there. And from that, I got great little facts, like the fact that Pollock, after the first exhibition in New York, he went into the gallery, and he and gallery owner Sydney Janis took the painting off the wall, and Pollock just ripped it off its frame. And the Sydney Janis was like, what? You know? I thought, wow. I mean, I'm interested in that sort of thing, and I'm interested in how the painting might feel about that. But as for how to look at art and talk about art and write an article from an art historian point of view, that's not my forte. So, you know, I never looked at it like.
Are you a gallery goer?
Yeah, I like going to galleries and hanging out. Yeah.
What do you like in Australian art? What do you?
Oh, I like Grace Cossington Smith in Australia, and you know, yeah, I've got. I don't know, but yeah, I like Australia.
You go to the art gallery yourself?
Yeah, I go to the art gallery. You should go to the Archipel every year.
You been to Whiteley's studio?
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Because that's another character of ours that makes me think of Pollock to a certain degree, in that sort of flawed genius.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I like, so my stepdaughter's an artist, and I like her art. We live with her art. So
she's here?
She's here.
Where is she?
But in the front row.
Oh, hello.
Probably not happy that I'm. She's not painting at the moment, but anyway, so we do have art in our house, and yeah.
I wonder, at the National Gallery, have you ever, you haven't been on a tour and heard what they say about build models? Because I imagine.
I actually have.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Because a couple of years ago there was an exhibition at the National Gallery, and it was all the American paintings.
Yes, I
they
remember
had.
that.
Remember
Yeah,
that?
I do.
So I went to that, and my friend
Didn't
and
they
I did a
move
tour.
poles for that?
They did move
That's
it,
right.
yeah. So I actually was writing a book at the time. I was there with my friend, and a tour guide was there, and I felt slightly sort of possessive. You know, there were big crowds around the painting. I was used to seeing it on my own.
What was it? Did you concur with what they were saying about it, or?
Yeah, I can't remember, to be honest, but yeah, I'm sure they knew what they were talking about.
Do you have in mind any other literature of a similar ilk when you're writing the book? Was there anything that influenced you, do you think?
Well, there was the Heather Rose
The Heather Rose book.
And I've always...
Which was funded by his nibs at the...
That's right,
Mona.
down in Mona.
Yes.
That's right, she had some sort of... she lived there for a while.
Yeah.
No, I like short novels, and
Bless you.
I really love... I remember before starting the book, I loved the work of Eleanor Ferrante, and especially her novellas.
Yes.
I remember reading them and really thinking, this form.
The publishers don't like to use the word novella.
I know, but novella.
It was very popular when I was a young fella.
Right.
Books like Siddhartha by Herman Hesse,
Right.
Hunger by Knut Hamsun. Picador did a lot of novellas. It's a very good form.
Well, I'm hearing that it's coming back.
It's back. Where to from here? I mean, where do you go to next?
I'm writing another book.
Yes.
Started that
I
one.
hope so. Yes.
And yeah, so it's also about art. I don't think I'll always write about art, but it's about Suzanne's wife, who he painted her 29 times. They had a terrible marriage.
Right.
And I'm just really interested in her. Like, what was her life like?
Right.
Yeah.
What made you interested in Suzanne?
We were in Paris and we went to an exhibition, and it was his portraits, Suzanne's portraits, and
Whereabouts was this at?
at the Musée d'Orsay.
Okay.
And
When was
there
it?
was a 2017, it must have been. And
Tell me you.
I actually met someone in a restaurant the other day who said I was at that same.
Well, I was there in
exhibition.
2017.
Oh, you kidding? You were
Paris.
there?
No, Paris.
Oh, you didn't go to the exhibition?
No, because the Musée d'Orsay, the lines put me off. There was a queue.
Oh,
Yes.
oh, okay. Yeah, well, anyway, and so there was a portrait of Hortense, her name is,
Right.
and there was a quote from Suzanne, and he said, when their marriage broke up, he said, "My wife is only interested in Switzerland and Lee."
Unusual
Just-
combination.
I know, and I just thought, wow, this is amazing.
Okay. Interesting to see how that
Yes,
works out.
Anyway,
Yeah, no, that's
progress.
yeah. And how would you? I mean, you've seen the exhibition, but how are you researching that? We have some Suzanne's. Actually, there's a very fine Suzanne coming to Brisbane shortly. We're getting a European Masterpieces exhibition from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
Wow.
There's a lovely Suzanne. It's not as white.
Okay.
But how are you going to research it, or how are you researching?
I'm reading,
Right.
so there's various books about his work and about the 29 portraits, and I've just got a book about her life, and it's it's a section of the book. It's very short and very little is known about it. So I'm going to have to look at that.
So you're looking at your subject to sort of just slightly to the left or right of the actual, like, Suzanne's the famous one.
Yeah.
And so you're looking for the
Yeah,
story
that's
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 untold.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be just interesting to explore, I guess. But that's still in progress,
Yeah,
so
sure.
it's not really. I can't really talk about it like it's
You just talked about
done. I know I can, but it's not done.
What do you like reading? Who are the authors that have inspired you or growing up?
So Virginia Woolf.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, very much. And this is terrible. My friend said this. She's a writer too. She said, when people ask you what you like to read, you just can't think.
What were you reading as a kid?
As a kid, I think I remember reading like Harold Robbins and this kind of thing when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
That was in our house, and I read that and those sorts of books. And then the sort of bestsellers. And then I remember finding Virginia Woolf's The Years on our bookshelf at home.
Yeah.
And I read that, and I remember thinking, wow, this is something else, something different going on there. And it was like a little turning point. And then, of course, at school, you get influenced by how the teachers love the literature that they teach. And that's
Were your parents bookish?
Yeah, they always read books. You wouldn't say, oh, they're bookish. I mean, they weren't reading Shakespeare or anything, but yeah, they always read. Yeah.
Your folks are no longer with us?
That's correct.
Yeah. Were they encouraging of your writing career?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think, it's sad, obviously, that they're not here.
How long ago did they pass away?
Oh, Dad would have been 20 years or something.
What was your dad's
More
name?
than 20 years, 1995. His name was Nick, and my mother's name is Eileen, and she passed in 2015.
I'm just intrigued by this household of 10 children. How did that work?
Well, you know, just the way any other household works, I guess, but there were just people
Are you Catholic?
walking everywhere, you know, to see more people. Yeah,
You ain't here, so.
I'm not now, but yes, definitely the family. And
Why not? You know, you can come back if you like.
well,
I'm
you know,
Catholic.
some say you never leave.
That's true.
But,
Were you writing as a kid? Did you have any time for that?
I think I remember in high school writing poetry, just like many kids do.
Any other writers in the family?
No,
No. And the
not that
family,
I know of.
right. And the families, whose family here this evening? And they're from far afield, Atherton, where else?
Oh, my daughter writes.
Oh, your daughter writes?
Yeah. She's
Okay.
not making her living from it, but yes, she writes.
What is she writing?
Mm.
Poetry.
No, not poetry. She wrote. She's had some stories published,
Hmm.
sort of like non-fiction, mainly.
Do you have much interest in talking about the book? Like you've done independently books. You know, Australian Story hasn't come after you yet, or anything. You know, like you're not doing any. It's a made for television kind of interview, really. You and the polls.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been approached?
I'm doing a couple of radio
Yeah.
interviews coming up, but not television.
Well, I mean, once the word gets out, it will might develop a life of its own.
Mm-hmm.
How are you coping with the attention?
It's not that much attention, really.
There will be more.
I'm actually enjoying it,
Yeah.
to be honest. You know, at first I thought, oh, this is just something I've got to get through, like the publicity bit of it. But I actually feel like it's interesting, and I'm meeting people.
Yeah, I think, well, I was telling Angela, my wife has recommended she and her book club do the book club, which I think is a perfect book for the book club.
Right.
Are you aware that that's happening out there yet, or it's still too early?
Oh, people are saying to me,
Yeah.
you know,
It's a good book
my
club.
our book club sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I hope that happens. That'd be great. I think we've got to wind up.
We're ready for some questions, I think. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, if you've got some, you're going to moderate the questions.
I'll hand the microphone around.
Sure, the family's got something to ask.
You can just.
When you stood in front of the painting, what did it say to you?
You know, it's funny when I go and see the paint, because I've been probably 6 times now to see the painting, maybe 7, and it doesn't, you know, I don't know. All I know is that I look at it and then I go and walk back to the hotel, and then ideas, you know, this is while I was writing the book, ideas would come. But while I was actually looking at the painting, you know, I guess I'm just enjoying looking at it, and it does sometimes seem brighter. Actually, the last time I went, I thought that it looked brighter, and they had actually cleaned it. So that is maybe why. But you know, it seems to move a bit and maybe reach out a bit.
Depends what you're smoking, I suppose.
So
I'm actually curious to know, obviously your book personifies the Blue Poets. how would you describe the voice of the book? Is it gruff? Is it smooth? How would you describe it?
I think it's actually quite gentle, really. I feel that. I don't know if readers get that, but I don't. It's fairly emotional. I mean, it's all about feeling, and I think there's a turning point in it for me writing where I realised that the painting didn't possess judgment. You know, the painting. So it's not. And that made that character of the painting not human to me, sort of something beyond human, because I felt like it really needed to be. It couldn't be like this man or woman inside a painting, you know, that was telling a story. Yeah.
Is there another question from the audience? Someone like to yell another question? I guess I have a question about your editorial process. So when you first wrote it to what it is as the final product, how much of a difference was there, or did you have an editor with a very light hand?
So, you know, by the time this book came out, it was like out of me, I mean. The first part didn't change a lot. So it was pretty, I guess it didn't need a lot of editing. When by the time it got to the publisher, he said, you know, doesn't need a lot. But I had a really good editor, and she did sort of challenge me in certain areas, and so it wasn't just a matter of making it all a bit smoother. There were parts where I really worked on, like actually adding a little bit, or yeah, just rejigging it quite a bit in parts. Does that answer?
Yes, it does actually. I'm always interested in the editorial process and how much an editor, because sometimes an editor will try to put their own voice in as well. But I think with your book, the voice itself is quite unique. And it's nice that there was a light hand from the editor there as well.
We should point out there's just not just one voice in the book.
That's correct. There are two narrators.
Yeah, so the other narrator is?
Her name is Alyssa, and I guess she's about, you know, early 20s at the beginning, and then by the end she's in her late 30s, and she gets a job when she's a student going to the storage room in Fishwick in Canberra, where the painting is being stored before the gallery opens. And she actually doesn't like the painting, mainly because she doesn't like Jackson Pollock. She doesn't like his character, his violence, and the fact that he's, by all accounts, probably been violent towards his wife. So there's that conflict in the book. Is Alyssa goes on a sort of a journey to where there are things that happen that cause her feelings to shift.
Well, it's important to mention that because there are the two.
Yes, I think it couldn't.
No.
Well, it just needed that.
Yeah,
I think it needed that because then there's that sort of conflict.
Yeah. And there is an interesting personal story around her too. It's a bit of an existential story about her marriage, and
that's correct.
So on,
Yeah, so
which is not about your marriage, I believe.
No. So I wanted to explore that line between, you know, is there a gap between life and art, or you know, is it just so woven together that you can't really separate it?
How did you feel when you stood in the barn?
Oh, it was wonderful. Yeah, it was great.
What time of year was it?
It was April, and it had just snowed, so everyone there was quite upset about this late snow, but I loved it. You know, it just felt very sort of like, yeah, this is the place where someone could make something. It didn't seem that special in a way, which is good. You don't want to, you know, if you're making something, you just want to feel comfortable, and that's what it felt like.
Sorry, do you want that back?
Yeah, we actually have a question from someone in our Zoom audience. And Heather asks, did you find yourself liking Pollock more or less during or after writing about him?
You know, I got to love him, to be honest, because I think the painting, you know, I was writing from the painting's point of view, so I guess I got to love, you know, experience the painting's kind of love for him, almost like a child for a parent, a very flawed parent. So yeah, I have you know, I have fear. I don't hate Pollock.
Well, he was suffering from alcoholism.
He was, but at the same time, he, you know, just the way he sort of, I guess, you know, a lot of fuss has been made about him, and you know, a lot of women artists have sort of not had that spotlight on them. So I guess that, you know, that was part of what drove me too when I was writing. Well, it certainly drives Alyssa, but I was interested in exploring that. Yeah, so I guess I felt like I perhaps understood him more by the end. Yeah.
I was really interested when you talked about that feelings but not judgment. Did the painting, I have read the painting, have a sense of time and
Yes,
does it have a sense of the future? That's beautiful.
very much so for the last part of that question. Really, that's what the book is about, is that sort of sense of possibility and moving forward. And there is, if you read the beginning chapter, there is, without giving anything away, the painting doesn't have a sense of time until it's in time. I mean, there's a period where it exists, but it's sort of existing outside itself and outside of time. But then it is in time. Yes. Yeah.
You must, and they're going to lock the doors, and you can't get out until you bought a book.
Well, I think that about wraps it up. I think, thank you. This has been, the book is such a unique take on what is such an iconic piece of Australian history, and I really love your approach to it. If you could all join me in thanking Angela and Phil for tonight. We will move everyone inside where you can mill around, grab a drink, and we'll be selling copies of Night Blue at the counter. And then we'll have Angela at the front of the store as well, where you can go chat and get your book signed as well. Thank you so much.